All right. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most tangled and, frankly, disturbing stories of our time, the Jeffrey Epstein Files. We're not just going to rehash the headlines. Nope. We're going to look at what happened after his 2019 arrest and what the release of all those secret documents really told us about power, influence, and who we trust. It all just explodes in the summer of 2019, right? The financier Jeffrey Epstein gets arrested on these absolutely shocking sex trafficking charges. But then, just a month later, he's found dead in his jail cell. And that, well, that's where the real fight for the truth began.
And I mean, the indictment itself was just damning. It laid out this vast, horrifying network of abuse, all involving minors. But his death, which was officially called a suicide, well, that didn't close the book on this. Not even close. If anything, it ignited this absolute firestorm of conspiracy theories and a massive public outcry for one single thing: answers.
So that brings us to the big question, right? What exactly were these Epstein files that everyone was fighting tooth and nail to see? For a lot of people, the hope was that they contained one single explosive document, a smoking gun that would blow the whole thing wide open.
Now, what most people were really expecting, what drove so much of the public anger, was a client list, some kind of secret book naming all the powerful men who were involved in his crimes. But here's the twist. The official reality was, well, something else entirely. A crucial Justice Department memo, along with the FBI's own investigation, concluded that there was just no evidence that a client list like that ever even existed.
The investigative reporter who really blew the lid off the story, Julie K. Brown, she put it best. She said the so-called list was really just a red herring. It was more like a giant contact book, almost like a phone directory that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell built up over years. And it's this huge gap, this chasm really, between what people expected and what officials were saying that lit the fuse for a massive political fight over transparency. So let's get into that battle for the truth, because the way the government handled these files, it actually created something we almost never see anymore: a moment of unity in Washington. Yep, both sides of the aisle were outraged. So you had the Department of Justice basically trying to say, case closed, no list to see here, but Congress wasn't having it. They pushed back hard. In a really rare move, Republicans and Democrats came together and passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which forced the government to release everything. But then the DOJ drops 3 million pages and says, okay, we're done. And almost immediately, people cried foul, saying it wasn't enough. And that just poured more fuel on the fire of suspicion. And a huge part of the problem, a really central criticism, came from the victims groups. They pointed out something awful. The heavy redactions, all the blacked out text, made it easy to figure out who the victims were. But Epstein's enablers, they got to hide behind that secrecy. Lawmakers from both parties jumped on this, arguing that these sloppy, inconsistent redactions were clearly protecting powerful people and totally defeated the whole point of releasing the files in the first place. And the result of all this back and forth? A huge, and I mean huge, hit to public trust. Just look at the numbers. A CNN poll around that time found that a staggering 2/3 of Americans believed the government was deliberately hiding information. Think about that. 2 out of every 3 people. That's a massive crisis of faith. Okay, so if there wasn't this mythical client list, then what in the world was in those millions of pages? Well, they revealed something that, in its own way, is just as disturbing: a very carefully, meticulously built network of powerful contacts. You can actually see it in an FBI diagram that came out of the files. It lays out Epstein's real inner circle. And again, this isn't a list of clients. No, this is the group of loyal associates, the powerful business partners. These were the enablers, the people who made his whole operation possible. You've got his main partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, but also his lawyers and accountants, guys like Darren Indyk and Richard Kahn, who handled the money in the estate, and even billionaire business figures like Les Wexner. But maybe the biggest bombshell, the real takeaway from all these documents, was this: they proved that a lot of powerful people kept up their relationships with Epstein long after he was convicted as a sex offender back in 2008. I mean, this flew in the face of their own public statements, their denials. It just showed crystal clear how insulated he was, how protected he was by this web of powerful friends. And as you can imagine, the release of all these names, flight logs, and private emails had immediate, real-world consequences. We're talking a fallout that was felt not just in the US, but all over the world. At home, the public was just not happy, to put it mildly. A Reuters poll showed that less than a quarter of Americans, think about that, only 23% approved of how the administration was handling the whole thing. That number right there, it tells you everything you need to know about the deep, deep distrust this whole process created. And the fallout just kept spreading. It went global. All of a sudden, a national security advisor in Slovakia had to resign. The UK government was on the hot seat, facing tough questions about whether sensitive info is being leaked to Epstein. And you had countries like Russia just grabbing these files and using them as propaganda. See? Look at the moral rot in the West. And all the while, back in the States, those key questions about who was being protected by those blacked-out documents, still no answers.
And that leaves us with a final, and honestly, a pretty unsettling thought. The whole point of pushing for transparency, for releasing these files, was supposed to be about restoring faith, about getting some kind of justice. But what if it did the opposite? By showing us just how powerful the powerful really are and how our own institutions can fail to be transparent, maybe it just eroded our trust even more. Which leaves us with the biggest question of all.